You know what I like about Genshin Impact's story? It's kinda like a big jigsaw puzzle of lore. But unlike a regular jigsaw puzzle that has all the pieces in the box right from the beginning, Genshin doesn't give you the whole puzzle up front. It delivers piles of new pieces at regular intervals. You might have pieces that don't seem to fit anywhere for ages, until suddenly a new batch arrives, and what do you know? Now you have somewhere to put that old piece. You can see a little more of the bigger picture. But somehow, now you have even more new pieces that you just can't seem to fit in anywhere. Are we liking this analogy? Let me try again. Genshin's story is like a book with long passages where the text has been intentionally covered up, or whole pages torn out, so you're missing important context to fully understand what you can read. Occasionally, as the story goes on, you'll get a scrap of an old page, or you'll learn something that makes those unreadable passages suddenly fill in and everything makes more sense. But there are many pages that are still missing. 5.7's Archon quest, A Space and Time for You, is one of those quests that answers a few questions, but now you know even more about what you still don't know. Anyway, I'm on Secret Crush. I've been playing Genshin Impact since just after launch, and streaming it on Twitch for almost as long. I used to use my stream archives as a way of preserving my Genshin experience, but Twitch now only allows 100 hours of permanent stream archives. If you've ever played it, you know that's nowhere near enough hours for Genshin, so I've been trying something different. Today, I'll be recapping the whole story of 5.7's Archon quest, A Space and Time for You, and attempting to untangle the great big yarn ball of lore. If you haven't played the quest yourself and are worried about spoilers, now's the time to save this video for later. If you're all caught up, or spoilers don't bother you, then settle in and let's get to it. One more quick note before we begin. I play as Girl Traveler Lumine, so the Abyss twin for me is Ether, so that's how I'll refer to them throughout the recap. Traveler is girl, Abyss twin is boy. We begin with Traveler and Paimon paying a visit to the Collective of Plenty. They run into Ian-san, who tells them that everyone is so busy preparing for a big bodybuilding competition that there just aren't enough volunteers to handle routine patrols. Ever helpful, Traveler offers to take on a patrol shift. Just a bit outside the tribe's settlement, they spot an unfamiliar cave. There's a lone hilichurl sitting inside, which startles at their approach and runs away. Traveler notices something on the ground where the hilichurl had been sitting. What they find, to her surprise, is a key to a sleep pod from the spaceship that brought the twins to Teyvat. This is the first explicit mention of a spaceship being how the twins got here, but it seems pretty obvious. We're expected to just roll with it, so we will. Traveler still has her own sleep pod key, so the one they found must belong to her brother. Just as they wonder if this means Traveler's brother or the Abyss Order is nearby, Ian-san arrives to tell them they're no longer needed for patrols, because the competition is off. Why is it off? Oh, just that the Abyss Order attacked the tribe. No big deal. No, really, Ian-san doesn't seem especially concerned, but she does ask Traveler to come along to the speaker's chamber to meet with Moika about it. Moika also doesn't seem very worried, even though all the tribes have reported Abyss Order attacks, indicating this is some sort of coordinated effort. Compared to Natlan's recent victory over the actual Abyss, a tiny faction like the Abyss Order doesn't pose much of a threat. She's confident Natlan's seasoned war veterans can handle things on their own, but Traveler reveals she has personal beef with the Order. Their leader is her brother. Moika and Ian-san are shocked, but not that shocked, at the news. But Moika says as long as she can trust the Traveler will take Natlan's side in the conflict, everything's all good. She even offers to deliver a good punch to Traveler's brother to teach him a lesson. Ian-san, Paimon, and Traveler meet up with Citlali, who is annoyed that the Masters of the Nightwind are being hit hardest by the Abyss Order. Do they think the tribe of shamans are pushovers or something? She also takes issue with the name, calling it the kind of hokey name a bad novelist might use because they don't believe in subtlety. Citlali is briefly embarrassed when Paimon reveals that the Abyss Order leader is Traveler's brother, but a group of Abysslings conveniently appear for her to vent her frustrations on. The group easily takes out the Abyss Order's stronghold, but all are still perplexed by the lack of any obvious motive for the Order to be attacking Natlan at all. Traveler thinks finding the key is their best lead, and decides to go back to the cave to look around for clues. Shortly after they arrive back at the cave, a young woman runs up calling for help, saying she's being chased by monsters. Traveler and Paimon rush out to help, but they can't see any monsters at all. It's only when the girl falls and Traveler takes her hand to help her up that suddenly she can see what the girl sees. Once the monsters are dealt with, the girl introduces herself as Daredith from a small village far away. She walked for so long she's unsure where she currently is. She hurt her ankle when she fell, so they take her to rest in the cave. She's referred to the Traveler as a savior a couple of times, so Paimon asks what's up with that. She explains that long ago, a wise prophetess passed through her village, warning that doomsday was coming, but a savior would appear to stop it. Since the day of disaster is fast approaching, Daredith's grandmother urged her to leave her village to try to find that savior. Traveler matches the description of the savior perfectly, all except for the gender. The prophecy said the savior would be a young man. Immediately, Traveler realizes the savior Daredith is looking for must be her brother. Daredith is thrilled to hear this, before she learns that the Traveler and her brother aren't exactly on good terms, and she doesn't know where he currently is. Because of the resemblance to the savior, and her heroic demeanor, Daredith is feeling a little starstruck and flustered in the Traveler's presence, but insists she's fine and just needs some time to calm down. They leave her to rest alone in the cave while they check in with Iansan at the Masters of the Night Wind. Iansan reports that there haven't been any more attacks, but guards have still been keeping watch for long hours. She thinks having a chat with the hero Tumaini might help keep morale up. After chatting with the guards on duty, we learn that nothing much has been happening, except for a few odd sightings of Abyss Order members appearing to meditate in the area. The shamans from the Masters of the Night Wind were unable to detect any signs of a threat, so they decided to let the Abyss Order meditate in peace, because Natlan respects religious freedom. Citlali overhears the mention of meditation, and shares that she just felt something in a dream, like some noise had gotten into the ley lines. She describes it as a signal on a different level of reality that might pose no threat but should still be investigated. Traveler asks Citlali if she's ever heard of monsters that are only visible to certain people. After explaining the whole Daredith situation, Citlali is concerned about the contrivance of hand-holding to see what Daredith could see. Both Citlali and Iansan express concern the girl could be a spy, or otherwise on the side of the Abyss Order. Her sudden appearance is too suspicious, and they suggest Traveler be wary around her. Traveler and Paimon arrive back at the cave, approaching it quietly. That causes Daredith to mistake them for monsters trying to sneak up on her, but luckily Traveler blocks her club attack quite easily. Once she sees who it is, Daredith apologizes profusely, saying she's been on edge ever since they left, and was only an hour and a half away from starving to death. Traveler and Paimon cook some food, and once the crisis of her imminent starvation is resolved, they all relax and have an interesting chat about the stars. Some of her comments make Traveler wonder if she knows about the false sky. Daredith also says her village was like her whole world, and while she cherished it, she also wished to explore beyond the boundaries of that world. Suddenly, Daredith says the monsters are back, and once Traveler takes her hand, sure enough, there are more monsters to deal with. Daredith gets all starry-eyed watching Traveler save the day again, then suggests they should all have a sleepover in the cave, since it's getting late. After spending the whole evening with her, Traveler is pretty convinced she's not a bad person, just an innocent civilian. Traveler dreams of seeing her twin in the Night Kingdom, conversing with the Lord of the Night, but she can't hear what's being said. She also hears a voice speaking of doomsday and the birth of a savior, presumably the prophetess. She wakes to find Daredith holding her hand. Daredith gets embarrassed again, explaining she just wanted to comfort Traveler like her grandmother used to do for her when she had bad dreams, but it seems like it only made things worse. Traveler tries to recall the dream, but can only recall seeing her brother in the Night Kingdom. The rest is too hazy. She declares she's going back to sleep, but Paimon makes a big fuss about staying awake to make sure Dareth doesn't try anything shady. The next morning, they leave Dareth with enough food to keep her alive until her ankle has healed, in a few more days. Since they may not see each other again, Dareth asks how they can get in touch with each other, in case either of them finds the Traveler's twin. Paimon says she can just write a letter to Moeka, but nobody notices when Dareth asks who Moeka is, because suddenly Traveler spots some passing abyss monsters. This time, Dareth is the one who can't see what Traveler and Paimon can see, until they try the old hand-holding trick again. After Traveler has dealt with the monsters, they say goodbye to Dareth again. Ianson reports that a lone, mysterious warrior with an unfamiliar sword style suddenly appeared and single-handedly defeated a huge number of abyss enemies. Paimon and Traveler know there's only one person that could be: Dainsleif. Unfortunately, he doesn't know what the Abyss Order is up to either, but he's all too happy to take the opportunity to demolish as much of their forces as possible in the meantime. When they mention finding the sleep pod key in Dareth, Dane is concerned to hear that she referred to the twin as the Savior. That name was also used for Aether even before the Cataclysm, when the Vinster King named him the Crown Prince and proclaimed he would be the savior of Conria. Dane assumes the most likely explanation is that Dareth is descended from a noble family that would have retained their human form after the Curse of Immortality, that settled in a remote isolationist village and maintained the tradition of the Savior story even after the Cataclysm. Paimon curiously says, "Oh, like Kaya!" Should we consider that confirmation Kaya is not literally 500 years old? Dane does not have a theory about the monsters only Dareth can see, but he also doesn't care that much, because she isn't going to provide helpful intel about how to crush the Abyss Order. The next morning, Ianson announces they've found the Abyss Order's base of operations in the Cinder City. Moeka is going to muster up an army to launch an attack, but Dainsleif doesn't want to wait that long. He declares he'll go alone and take care of the Order himself, then gives Traveler a pointed look until she agrees to go with him. This part gives us our first glimpse of Dainsleif in action, calling him in to deliver strikes with his unique power of, blue. It's fun. He just slides in and out of combat when summoned. Eventually they find the boss of the area, the Word Sword of Heaven's End, who villain monologues about how they're too late, the Loom of Fate has already completed its work, the ley lines of the new Conria have already been woven. Nobody really buys it. Dainsleif even straight up asks, "Oh yeah? Well, where is it?" Nonetheless, Traveler thinks back and recalls things like Citlali mentioning noise in Natlan's ley lines, the dream of her brother in the Night Kingdom, and not seeing the monsters Dareth can see. She comes to the conclusion that the Word Sword might not be lying. Dane's still not convinced, though, and after defeating him in battle, Traveler and Paimon take off to talk to Dareth again, thinking she might be from the revived Conria. Dane says he'll stay behind to do post-battle cleanup, but instead has a bit of an exposition dump chat with the Word Sword. Turns out he used to be Dane's swordmaster back in the Black Serpent Knights, Hayden. Dane didn't like him much even before he joined the Abyss Order, and after beating him up a bunch of times, says he's surprised his old teacher would join the Order. The prince who leads it was supposed to save their nation, but instead disappeared right before the crucial moment. But Hayden isn't mad at all, and believes the prince's current actions are an atonement for that abandonment. After delivering some more exposition on their shared history, kinda sounds like Hayden was not a good teacher. Hayden talks Dane into reminiscing about the golden age of Conria. Just thinking about the Conria of old takes a long time. But it was all a trick! Hayden was lying before about the Loom of Fate, but now it has Dane's memories to work with. Since he is in possession of a special ring that belonged to his brother Vedderfolnir, Dainsleif's memories are more complete than any other surviving Conrian. In addition to the scraps of memory the Order scrounged up with their meditation, the Loom can begin creating a new Khaenri'ah for realsies. Dane's mad about being tricked, but once again happy to take advantage of the Order sacrificing the majority of its army just to get his memories. Back with Traveler and Paimon, they spot Daredith standing outside, looking up into the sky. Traveler asks her what happened, and when Daredith grasps her hand, suddenly she sees the scene as Daredith sees it. A red sky, shattered earth and fire all around, and strange cubes rising into the air. This is the Cataclysm. Daredith asks the Traveler, "We aren't from the same world, are we?" Traveler clarifies, "I'm from your future." Daredith is relieved to hear that. That means the world didn't end. At first, she asks if Khaenri'ah survived, but then says she doesn't want to know. We can only fight for our future if it's unknown. She still believes the Savior can turn things around, so she's not going to stop looking for him. She asks Traveler to give her some kind of token to prove she met the Savior's sister if she finds him. Traveler realizes that's how the sleep pod key ended up in the hands of a Hilichurl. That Hilichurl is what the Curse of Immortality did to Daredith, the fate all commoners of Khaenri'ah met after the Cataclysm. Holding that key, Traveler considers giving Daredith the key or keeping it to try changing her fate. As soon as she makes her choice, time stops. Everything is still except for Traveler. An abyss portal opens, and Aether steps out, saying, "Ah, so this is how it happened." He also mentions that the ruler of time, Istaroth, must have made this meeting possible. 500 years ago, on the eve of the Cataclysm, Daredith found him and told him she'd met his sister. He had been searching for her without any success, but seeing the key, he suddenly knew exactly where to look for her. He knew he couldn't save Khaenri'ah and find his sister, and would have regrets no matter what he chose. Of course, he chose to find Lumine, and so Khaenri'ah was destroyed. He says, "My actions 500 years in the future set everything in motion." Aether goes on to explain what he means. The Abyss Order launched an attack on Natlan to provide a distraction while Aether snuck into the Night Kingdom to meet with the Lord of the Night, what Traveler saw in her dream. He sought the Lord of the Night's permission to use the Night Kingdom as a workspace for the Loom of Fate. She allowed it. He used an Intivat flower as the base, and collected memories as the material to weave the new ley lines, which were briefly superimposed over Natlan, which is what allowed Traveler and Daredith to meet. The Lord of the Night only agreed to let Aether use Natlan's ley lines as a workspace, however. To permanently revive Khaenri'ah will require a suitable host location. Until he finds it, the ley lines are contained in the Atlas of the New World. Lumine doesn't care about all that, though. She only wants to know why her brother cares so much about reviving Khaenri'ah, instead of reuniting with her and continuing their journey together. When he first arrived in Khaenri'ah, his memories were a blank slate, and while he eventually remembered his sister, he spent so much time in Khaenri'ah he considers it a second home, and feels he has a responsibility to make up for its destruction. He also wants to speak to the heavenly principles as an equal, which means he'll need the might of an entire world behind him. It's at this moment that he notices a familiar red portal that immediately disappears. It seems that the sustainer of heavenly principles, who separated them at the beginning of the game, the ruler of space, was eavesdropping on this whole scene. Since I chose to keep the key rather than give it to Daredith, Aether tosses his own key at her feet to ensure the time loop stays intact. No matter what, Daredith will always have a key to show the Savior, and he will always make the same choice he made 500 years ago. Lumine asks what all this has to do with us. She still doesn't understand why her brother's plans are more important than his family. Aether's expression is heartbreaking. He takes a breath and replies, "All along, it's always been about us. We will begin anew at the end of your journey." He holds up the atlas, which pulls everything into it except the traveler, who stands alone looking over Natlan's landscape. The wrap-up for the quest covers all the loose ends as far as Natlan is concerned. The Abyss Order took what was left of its forces and ran. Natlan won another war, but neither Iansan nor Paimon knows why Traveler looks so down. Traveler only says she and her brother had a long talk. Citlali got some information about that in a dream. The Lord of the Night allowed the reweaving to occur because she was intrigued by the idea of the Loom of Fate, a way to preserve a nation in the form of an atlas, and was satisfied it wouldn't cause any harm or interfere with Natlan. She also imposed an additional condition, but wouldn't share with Citlali what it was. Instead of going to the victory feast with everyone, Traveler says she needs some time to process everything. She goes alone to the cave. When she falls asleep there, she once again is faintly aware of someone gently holding her hand, but this time the feeling sends her into a peaceful sleep of sweet dreams. Okay, that was all a lot to take in. Honestly, when I was playing the quest, I got so distracted trying to make sense of the chronological timeline of events that I was barely able to appreciate the many heavy emotional beats of the story. I needed to let this quest simmer in the background for a while, until I was ready to tease out the tangled web of time and space. And of course, I took so long that Hoya went and dropped a massive lore bomb of a teaser that revealed a ton of new information that's very relevant to my thoughts about this quest. I want to start by laying out a simple order of events regarding the twins' arrival and time in Teyvat, based on what we currently know. They arrive in their spaceship. The sibling somehow arrives in Conria with their memories erased or sealed. Traveler remains in their sleep pod. The sibling gradually remembers they have a twin and unsuccessfully looks for them all over the world. Traveler is still in their pod, wherever it is. On the eve of the cataclysm, Daredith shows the sibling the sleep pod key, which presumably helps them remember where to find the spaceship and/or sleep pod. Sibling finds Traveler, who is sound asleep with their own key still with them. Sibling still has their key as well, meaning the key Daredith showed them was a third key that existed in that moment, according to the quest. The sibling is confused, but grabs Traveler and ran. This is when the game's opening cutscene occurs, where Asmodee prevents the twins from leaving and separates them in her cubes. The sibling is decubed in the same time period, 500 years ago, and witnesses the cataclysm. They get mad at the heavenly principles. The incubed Traveler wakes up 500 years in the future, meets Paimon, and begins their journey at the start of the game. The exact circumstances of the sibling arriving in Conria remain somewhat unclear. We learned in Inversion of Genesis that the heavens responded to the summoning. Scaramouche heard that from Piero, who was once a sage in the royal court of Conria. He does not explain what that means, but I'm guessing King Ermin did something to try to summon a savior, and in response, the sibling appeared. I'm not sure if the heavens implies the capital H heavenly principles or its shades, but let's just say it does, because it's going to be a load-bearing assumption I make later. Each time the Traveler has encountered their sibling before now, we as players got a couple random pieces of that timeline puzzle, as well as a hint on the progress of the Loom of Fate. It's almost certain that there are more key pieces we still don't have. Their actual face-to-face meetings have been quite few. Only 3, if we count the time they met in Caribear's invented memory space, that neither of them can now remember. Other times, we saw a memory of what the sibling has been up to, or simply a dream of a happy reunion that is yet to be. Hello. I wrote this first draft, 4 weeks ago, and then set it aside to focus on finishing my Skirk recap video. I was working off memory of the twins' quest, and my personal stream archives don't include anything older than 2.0, and for some reason, I didn't think to check if the older quest text supported my ideas. So imagine my surprise that reviewing the older quests for clips made me realize I probably do not have a leg to stand on with the theory I originally wrote. But rather than trying to write myself out of this corner, I decided to just leave it in, and add this disclaimer that this theory is probably very full of holes. But I still think it's an interesting idea, so please enjoy, with the knowledge I know I am probably wrong. It's possible that each time the sibling has appeared, they were at a different point in their own journey. What I mean is, travelers and ours experience of events is linear, each encounter or sign of their twin occurring on points A, B, C, and so on a line. But the sibling who they meet could be from points C, A, B, or who knows what point on their own timeline. In the first Twins Archon quest, We Will Be Reunited, we meet a sibling who says, "I have more than enough time to wait for you. We have always had enough time," which could imply that sibling already has the Atlas at that meeting. Or at the very least, they feel very confident about how things will unfold for the traveler from that point on. There's also the matter of the Intivat flowers. As Girl Traveler, she says she's had those flowers in her hair since she woke up. In the Boy Traveler version, he first sees them in his sister's hair when he wakes up. So that seems like a good indication that no matter who woke up who, the Abyss twin has the flowers, and the sleeping twin is unfamiliar with them. Also, Lumine is already wearing them in the opening cutscene, so that feels like good evidence for my overall order of events. Let me give a disclaimer. I am not a quantum physics, or even a regular physics guy. I've seen people discussing this quest use terms like bootstrap paradox, stable time loop, growing block universe, and I have no clue what all that means, and trying to figure out was making my head spin. I'll leave the smart guy hard sci-fi angle to folks better equipped to explain it. I'm only going to focus on putting together a vibes-based explanation of events that is comprehensible to me, not completely flawless. We're not hunting for plot holes here. Traveler exists in one plane of time. Daredith exists in her own plane of time. Neither of them has time traveled. Daredith's plane was only very briefly occupying the same space as Traveler's. Think of each of them as on a transparent sheet, like an animation cell. Animation cells typically contain one frame of a single character's movements and are laid on top of a background painting. Any background objects that never need to move are painted as part of that background, but if the character is going to pick up or manipulate an object, that would be also painted onto the cell, which is why you sometimes see objects that clearly stand out from the backdrop in old cartoons. Allow me to demonstrate what I mean with the magic of arts and crafts. Okay, so here's the cave in Natlan. That is the space Traveler and Paimon are in. And here we have Traveler and Paimon painted onto a transparent film. That is their time. Daredith, meanwhile, is on a different transparent film, which is her time, and her original space is a background painting that we don't actually see. Somehow Daredith's time has been separated from her space and placed on top of Traveler's space. She had walked far from home, so she doesn't recognize the space she's in, or notice that she's interacting with people from a different time. The monsters in Daredith's time are only visible to her until she touches Traveler's hand. And it's this contact that allows them to see the same time, in a sense, because their times have briefly merged into one. And since Paimon did not come into contact with either, she still only can see what's in her own time. And at the end of the quest, when they touch hands, Daredith's time is the one in focus, and we can see the space that is the Cataclysm 500 years ago. Now remember, this isn't a perfectly scientific representation of what is happening, or even how traditional cell animation works. It is a metaphor. Please roll with it. So, what happened in this quest is technically not time travel in the sense that no one has actually left their own time. Each person's time is layered over the same space and can briefly merge under certain conditions. This is at least partly a quirk of weaving the Atlas in the Night Kingdom, but the fact that people on different layers of time can see each other at all is possibly a result of the ruler of time manipulating things. The ruler of space might also be involved since her portals were spotted, like she was eavesdropping on the twins' conversation. Before the God's Limits teaser dropped, when I finished the quest, I thought Istaroth and Asmodee might be working together for some reason. And actually, I guess I do still think that. The teaser gave some additional context to the current state of the Shades, but just because Istaroth doesn't say anything doesn't mean she doesn't know what Asmodee is up to. Her idle fidgeting and thousand-yard stare could also be indicating that she's trying not to look like she knows something. My current theory is that one or both of them want to make sure one twin goes down the Abyss route and gains the desire to confront the heavenly principles. The heavens responded to the summoning could imply that one or both of them also had a hand in sending the sibling to Conria in the first place. Which is kinda messed up if true, because the Cataclysm and the Curse of Immortality is supposedly a divine punishment for Conria's sins, one of which was Ermin wanting power from beyond the world. And then there's the 5 sinners themselves. Dane said they were supposed to stop King Ermin from wrecking up everything, but instead they divided up the siblings' abyssal power amongst themselves and let the Cataclysm happen. I've noticed some intriguing parallels between the sinners and the Shades, starting with the fact that if you count the heavenly principles, there are 5 of each. It's long been theorized that the 5 types of artifacts correspond to the heavenly principles and its 4 shades: Flower of Life, Plume of Death, Sands of Time, Goblet of Space, and the Crown of Logos or Reason. Each of the sinners may also be related to those same concepts. The most obvious example is Rhindaughter, who literally devoured and thus merged with the ruler of life. As a visionary prophet, Vedrfolnir could perhaps see all of time, and Sertology talks a lot about reason in Skirk's quest. But when it comes to the rest of them, I haven't got a clue, or anything other than vibes to really back this up. The main thing I'm getting at is that these are 2 groups who seem like they would be on opposing sides, with interesting parallels between them, and both might be taking actions that lead things towards the same outcome. I feel like I have a pretty decent grasp on the broad what of it all, just not the how or the why. And the why is far more important and interesting to me. I guess I'll just have to wait and see if I'm onto something here, or completely out in the weeds. With the new information from the teaser, the only factor I still have no clue about at all is the heavenly principles themselves. I've had suspicions that Istaroth might be acting against the rules ever since A's story quest. The sacred Sakura is somehow free from the clutches of the heavenly principles, and its existence required help from a higher power than Makoto herself. Rhindaughter has commandeered whatever Nibirius' original intentions are, and I doubt she's very inclined to do anything just because the boss HP says so. Asmodee is completely AWOL, which is a surprise since for years she's only been known to us as the sustainer of heavenly principles. What happened? Did she get tired of sustaining? Even Renova, who's behaving like an eldest daughter trying to maintain order in the parents' absence, is showing hints in her demeanor that she too might want to break the rules. If only she thought it would ever be allowed. Fighting God is a staple of video games, but I honestly never expected even the Shades would end up having beef with God along with everybody else in Teyvat. Daredith doesn't want to know Conria's fate, because if the future is unknown, she can hold on to hope for it. Where the future is known, such as through prophecies, things proceed toward that result as if on rails. Vedrfolnir prophesied that Sertology would send his disciple to Teyvat, so Sertology, who didn't see himself as the teaching type, took Skirk as a student and sent her to Teyvat. Is the visionary a prophet with a 100% accuracy rate, or do his prophecies remove the unknown quality of the future? When people have an idea about the future, do they end up unconsciously behaving in ways that will create that future? Was Conria destroyed not because the king and the nobility overstepped their mortal authority, but simply because a prophecy of destruction existed? Interestingly, there do seem to be methods of subverting prophecy, not by proving it false entirely, but by finding loopholes in fate's plans. Fontaine's flood prophecy, which I guess was influenced by Vedderfolnir somehow, implied that all the people of Fontaine would dissolve into the primordial waters, leaving the Hydro Archon alone weeping on her throne. And the waters did rise, but no human lives were lost, thanks to Focalor's planning and the ultimate sacrifice of the Hydra throne. To Farina and the ordinary people of Teyvat, it seemed like the prophecy was wrong after all. But as far as the gods would be concerned, their planned history of the future came to pass. The finer details outside of the broad strokes are of no concern to them. But all this continues to raise the question, does free will exist at all in Teyvat? Let's look back at last summer's Simulanka event. Constellation Metropole is a clockwork city full of little wind-up toy people who live quite literally on tracks, laid out for them by the goddess of prophecy. The toy people are free to live their lives as they choose. It's entirely their choice what kind of oil to use in their daily skincare, for example. The fact that they will use oil is apparently a foregone conclusion. But if one is ever about to step too far outside their predetermined path, say by falling off a cliff when they aren't supposed to, they will literally freeze in place. In the course of Simulanka's story, the toy people keep getting frozen in place or stuck in loops, as if the system of prophecy is breaking down. Even so, they're hesitant to leave the familiarity of predetermined fate. Having to live with an unknown future where anything could happen is scary to them. But they do in the end, because that's what the three goddesses, aka Alice and her friends, wanted for them. Summer event stories are pretty much always important thematic foreshadowing for future main story updates. Mona even said outright that Simulanka's stars were a perfect mirror of Teyvat's. So it seems like an easy guess that the ultimate goal of Genshin's story is going to be breaking out of Teyvat's system of fate. But this brings me back to the question of who is actually at the wheel controlling Teyvat's fate. If we assume that the original course of fate was decided by the heavenly principles, then the shades are intended to uphold it. Before we got more pieces of the puzzle from the quest in the teaser, I assumed Asmodee was, sustaining the heavenly principles by stopping the twins from leaving Teyvat. But now it seems more like she's acting against the rules. The cataclysm and the twins' actions that caused and are caused by it seems like a load-bearing pillar in some kind of grand plan. Does Asmodee want the sibling to confront the heavenly principles? Is Istaroth, and maybe even Rhine-daughter Nibirius, helping make that happen? I don't know, man. Let's move on to something else. Some things we learned about Dane this time. He has a ring that belonged to his brother, which is able to reset his body's condition. This is presumably how he's holding it together relatively well after 500 years of memory erosion. It's probably also the it he vaguely referred to back in the chasm, the reason why he's still himself instead of a shambling husk like the other Black Serpent Knights. It's not the first time a ring was mentioned, but the Pari Zervan only spoke vaguely of a one-armed swordsman who appeared during the cataclysm, clutching a ring. One could have reasonably used context clues to determine she was talking about Dainsleif back then, but Hoya wanted to be sure it was completely unambiguous this time. Dane also mentioned that Sertologi the Foul was a fellow Black Serpent Knight trained by Hayden. Hayden was a cruel teacher back then, punishing students like Dane and Sertologi who were only trying to uphold the Knight's code of chivalry. Sertologi even lost limbs over it. Maybe that's where Sertologi's sword-teaching style came from? The quest also seems to be underlining the concept that memories are foundational to someone's personality, Which isn't too surprising. A person's lived experience is naturally going to influence how they behave. Dane knew Hayden to be cruel and unforgiving, but as the Word Sword of Heaven's End, he doesn't remember he was like that, and even says if he could remember his transgressions, he would earnestly apologize for them. Now, that may have all been a trick just to get Dainsleif reminiscing, but later, Lumine says the way Ether is talking doesn't sound like him. It's true that he would have 500 years of lived experiences she doesn't, but his original memories from before Teyvat were also erased or sealed. He remembered his sister eventually, but he could still be missing other shared memories that formed the personality Lumine would be more familiar with. It's a detail I think I want to keep an eye out for as the story continues. We already knew that at some point the Abyss sibling traveled all over Teyvat with Dainsleif. We also know from this quest that the siblings searched all over the world looking for Traveler, but could never find her before seeing the key jogged his memory. What I do not know is if these are two separate world journeys or the same one. I'm pretty sure journeying with Dane is supposed to have happened after the Cataclysm, based on the information from the Pari. So, assuming my constructed timeline of events is correct, that can't have been when the sibling was looking for Traveler. We also know that at some point, the sibling decided he hated Dainsleif and considered him an enemy. But if the sibling hates Dane because he failed to stop the destruction of Conria, then learning that must have happened at some point while traveling with him or after it concluded. I suppose it could have even been long after. There are 500 years between the Cataclysm and the game's present day, after all. They were also still traveling together when the sibling met Clothar and Caribert, which got the ball rolling on the founding of the Abyss Order and creating the Loom of Fate, which was all sometime after the Cataclysm. My other question is, how was the destruction of Conria Dane's fault? Here, Ether seems to accept it was his own decision to leave that failed to prevent the destruction. If I'm right that the twin we met back in We Will Be Reunited already had the Atlas, does that mean there's something he learned after obtaining the Atlas that we still don't know about? I kinda want to keep pulling at this thread, but it feels like it might be beyond the scope of this video. About Daredith. When she first introduces herself, she says it was her grandmother who urged her to go out looking for the Savior. Later, however, she talks about leaving to find the Savior as if it was a choice she made on her own, and related to her childhood curiosity about the wider world. It was also her grandmother who said that for the people who never left their village, questions about whether the sky was real or what might be beyond it were unimportant. The village was their world, and that made it real to them. Maybe that's just a clever way of telling a daydreaming child to stay home where it's safe, but I find it curious. What if Grandma only wanted to keep Daredith's curiosity in check, so she wouldn't think about leaving home until the time was right? There's also the curious matter about the prophetess who visited Daredith's village, describing Doomsday and the Savior. It's not confirmed, but it certainly sounds like Mage N, Nicole Rain of the Hexenzirkel. I continue to be intrigued and perplexed by what the Hexenzirkel Witches' goals are. Are they on anyone's side? Are they stirring things up for their own agenda? But one possibility I thought of is that for whatever reason, Nicole made sure that that specific village would know exactly what the Savior looked like, so that one day a young woman would take it upon herself to go find that Savior at a specific moment. It's wild just how many different beings seem to have their fingers on the scale of fate. I know there's some debate on whether or not Daredith is from the original Conria or is a product of the Atlas. If she's from old Conria, then she's just an ordinary person who only wanted to try to save her world from Doomsday, and was instead made into a pawn by forces beyond her comprehension for accomplishing some kind of unknowable scheme. If she was created by the Atlas, weaving new ley lines from surviving Conrian's memories, she would be more like an invention, a storybook character, not necessarily a memory of a real girl who once lived through the Cataclysm, but a character invented from fragments of memories. Either way, I think of what her grandmother told her. If you stay in this village your whole life, That's your world, and it's real to you. Whether she's from New Conria or old, she's being used as a tool for others' goals, when all she really wants is to find the savior that will save her world from ending. Teasing out the answer to this question might be a fun thought exercise, but I don't feel like it's all that important to the overall narrative. Also, I tried the best I could to find some origin of the name Daredith, but I got nowhere. Every single search result just points back to the Genshin character. Most of the Conrians we know have names that originated from Nordic or Germanic mythology or history. I was sure there would be some interesting meaning to be gleaned from her name, but never could find any sign that it even was a name that existed before this quest. I'm not sure if it's meant to be a variation on Deirdre or Edith, but neither of those leads got me anywhere that seemed relevant either. Let me know in the comments if you have any knowledge about this. Now, this isn't so much about the quest Space and Time, but I want to squeeze it in anyway. That teaser lore drop ultimately didn't derail my theories for this quest too much in the end, but I am forced to admit that it has possibly confirmed a theory about the game as a whole that I really didn't want to be true. A thing about me is, I much prefer to come up with my own ideas and theories about what Genshin's foreshadowing is, well, foreshadowing. I do like to read and watch other people's theories, but if I can't see the pieces for myself, I at least want to hear a compelling argument for why it's a likely possibility. That's why I'm still not quite sold on the fact that Vedrfolnir had something to do with Fontaine's prophecies. I never saw the hints of that myself in the game, so when Traveler just outright said it in Bedtime Story, I was like, huh? I have accepted that the game has told me explicitly that's what happened, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. Now, when it comes to Paimon, lots of people have theorized for ages that she had some connection to the unknown god from the beginning of the game. Way back when we learned that gods can expend massive amounts of their power until they shrink into little chibi versions of themselves with diminished memories and intellect, like Guoba, one of my friends even said, well, that's probably what Paimon is, a Guobified Asmodee. And I kinda laughed it off because I just didn't see it. How can Paimon even be related to Asmodee? Asmodee's color scheme is all white and red and gold. Paimon is white and pinky rose gold and blue, like stars. Their eyes aren't even the same color. I stubbornly wanted it to be proved false just because I couldn't see the connections for myself. Well, Hoyoverse has, potentially, made me look a fool, because it sure does seem like that teaser wants us to consider the possibility that there is a connection between the missing ruler of space and our constant floating companion. Maybe she's switched sides. Maybe she loves her new master more than her own self. Seems like quite a few people thought of Paimon immediately after hearing those lines. Defining their relationship as master and servant doesn't feel right, but it's hard not to think of the best travel companion and her Outlander buddy. I can even see a slight resemblance between Paimon and Renova in their hair. If the shades are all shadows of the same being, it wouldn't be that odd for a fragment of Asmodee to resemble the others. I'm still gonna be stubborn and hold out for the chance that we're still missing some important information to disprove it, before I'm convinced enough to hop on the Paimon is Chibi Asmodee train, though. Let me have this one pettiness. The Abyss siblings' plans have long been fairly clear. Undo the destruction of Conria, and meet God in the parking lot, I mean Celestia, to, I don't know, fight them? Debate them? And with this quest, their motive is clear as well. Conria is their second home, and they feel responsible for its fate. They want to reunite with their twin eventually, but this war with destiny takes precedence. By contrast, the Traveler's primary motivation has always been to find their twin and continue on their journey to find a new home. Everything else they, and we as players, have experienced has been secondary. Traveler's animosity for the Abyss Order is mainly because they see it as the thing that's keeping their twin away from them, while the twin seems pretty confident that Traveler is going to see things their way in the end. It can be tempting to fall into black and white thinking when it comes to the cartoonish antics of something called the Abyss Order, but think about the essence of what they are actually trying to do: resist the fate that heaven has forced on them. I don't know if the game has shown us enough to say what Traveler's opinion of the Heavenly Principles might be. Maybe even Traveler hasn't figured that out yet, busy as they are with making friends and helping each nation overcome some kind of existential crisis. But if you play Hoyo games long enough, you may notice a recurring theme in the stories. Humanity striving for its future in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Not once, in any of the Archon quests or world quests, have any characters ever said, well, nothing to be done, when faced with the threat of imminent destruction. Even a young girl like Daredith, of no particular importance, won't just sit and wait for the world to end if there was still something she could try to save it. So maybe the twin has a point, and we will also join them to fight God in the parking lot. Thank you so much for watching! This is a brand new type of thing for me to create, and very different from streaming quests live on Twitch. For one thing, composing a script gives me plenty of time and space to really ponder the quests until I have something actually interesting and hopefully informative to share about them. Hopefully in the future, it won't take me the entire length of a patch to finish them. If you've watched this far, perhaps you might like to subscribe to my channel. You can also check the link in the description to follow me on Twitch. I'm live once a week, and I'm usually playing Genshin there. My older stream archive will eventually migrate over here to YouTube as well. Take care, and see you next time!